would ever come again. And they went as a mass, as they always did at such times, to the crags, where men said there still dwelt a troll wife. And they hadn't gone far into the crags when out she came and said, "What? What are you all doing here? Do you not know? The god of the winter sun has stolen the summer sun. He has her up in the chasms in the North Pole. He means to keep her for all of time. He is brewing the nightmares in the night to flood over the land. This, I tell you, is the end of days. Why are you not running to hide? Not unless one of you is brave enough to steal back the summer sun." And all the men of the village hunched around and said, "Well, you know about that. Obviously, we don't want the world to end or anything, but I'm not sure I want to die for it." All save Oscar, who said, "Well, that's all very well for you, but I'm a bit younger. I've got nothing to lose. I'll go." And all the men laughed at him, for he was a foolish chap. The troll wife said, "All right, you go, but take this." And she took a great bronze pot in the shape of a heart, and she opened it, and she said, "In here is the ever-lit ember. Put that in your pocket, your breast pocket, and go." And so it was. Oscar put it in his breast pocket, and he went over the high mountains that went to the Arctic, seeking the palace of the god of the winter sun, the god of the sunset, when the sun will never rise again. He had many long journeys, longer than you could relate to, until at last he came right to the axis of the world, to the high mountain on which the god of the winter sun dwelt. And there was his mighty palace, made of ice. And Oscar thought, well, better not go through the front door. He walked round it. And after many days, he came to a bit of the wall he thought was a little bit lower than the rest. And then he took the pot, the bronze pot, with the ever-glowing ember, and put it on the wall. And it melted through a hole. And Oscar climbed through the hole, but he wasn't halfway through when suddenly the wall gave out and he tumbled down. And as he tumbled down, he felt the heavy hands of the hunters of the god of the winter on him. And he remembered that the men had muttered that all the frost giants had gone to serve her after Thrym had been slain. Wow. Oscar fell out of life and out of knowledge. How long he was asleep, he never knew. But all of a sudden, he felt terrifically hungry, and he jumped up on his all four legs, and his great claws squared the ground. And he let out a bolt of fire, and by the bolt of fire, he saw he was alone in a great chasm, and he had wings and was a dragon. And then he suddenly remembered it all. How he was alone in the castle of the god of the winter. And he felt more alone than he'd ever been before. And he also felt hungrier. Just then, a little voice behind him said, "Oh, you've woken up. Oh, good. Will you help us? Tell me, quickly, quickly, while you remember, what is your name?" And Oscar looked, and with dragon sight, he saw standing behind him was an Arctic hare with almost human eyes. And the Arctic hare said, "I'm called Greta. Now quickly, tell me your name." And Oscar said, "Hare, food." And he lunged at the hare to eat her. The hunger made him mad, made dragonish thoughts rise in his head. But she was quicker. She jumped away and eluded him. And Oscar collapsed, feeling despair and hunger equally measured, weeping great dragony boiling tears. Just then, there was a voice behind his ear and said, "I'm still here. Will you help me now? Tell me your name." And he looked and saw with his dragon eyes there was a crack in the wall, and he could just see the fat, plump hair behind it. So he reached in with his claw. Perhaps he meant to drag her out to talk to her. Perhaps he meant to eat her. But his claw stuck. And all of a sudden, there was a shooting pain. Ah! That made him howl with fury, dragon as he was. And the voice said, "Quick, tell me your name while you remember it. That pain will make you remember who you are." And he shouted, "I'm Oscar." And the pain redoubled, went up tenfold. And then all of a sudden, just before he fainted, he felt the hand released. And he took his claw out of the hole, and he saw his name was written on it. And then the hare came round and said, "This is what the god of winter does. To those of us who are cautious, they turns into little things, mice and hares, and we keep our minds. But all of you who are noble, he turns into beasts, and the dragon in you, or the lion or the griffin, bubbles up, and you forget who you are. My family were turned into bears, and my mother ate my brothers and my sisters, and they in turn were killed by wyverns, and so none of us are any good. But I was given a gift by the king of the trolls. He gave me a needle, which he could say it could write memories that could never be forgotten. And when I became a hare, that needle became my tooth, and she flashed the sharp needle. And then she looked at Oscar and said, "So will you help us? We are digging a tunnel. I've done measurements. I've gone all the way around the castle. I think I know where the god of summer is." And Oscar said, "I will help." And he was soon shown a tunnel, dug by the little creatures, squirrels, mice. And although they were so little, the tunnel was deep and true. And Oscar started to dig it further, widening it, as it were. But soon he came to a place where he felt so much fear and anxiety. And he asked Greta, who was behind him, and she said, "Oh, this is a horrible place. People died here, but don't worry, the tunnel goes that way." And she pointed up into the ceiling. And Oscar muttered, thinking there was something wrong here. And he dug and he dug and he dug until the light was ahead of him. And he punched through. And they were out in the frozen plain. And Greta said, "Oh, how could I have made this foolish mistake? I'm no good. We'll never find the god of the summer." But Oscar said, "Don't worry. I think your trouble is you're too much of a hare. Let's go back to that place you're scared of. Let us follow your fear." And so it was, he took Greta in his claw. With her screaming all the way, he went back to the place of fear and followed her fear deep, deep, deep down into the ford, until the rocks themselves went blue, the colour of ice. And he punched one last hole in, and he saw a mighty chasm, and at the end of the chasm there was black ice falling in a waterfall, and beyond it a golden light, the goddess of the summer. But between her and them there were fully 100 frost giants, armed to their teeth. And Oscar said, "I can't fight them, there's too many." And Greta said, "All right, take me up to the rocks and leave me there, hide nearby. And when the creatures that are always hungry but can never eat in this world come to devour me, pin them if you can." And Oscar said, "If you're sure." And so it was. Greta stayed up on the high mountain rocks, and soon a mighty wyvern, the chief of the wyvern clan, came flying down. And Oscar, the giant dragon, rode out and pinned the wyvern down. Backwards and forwards they wrestled in the sky. The dragon's fire, the poison of the wyvern, until at last Oscar, with his greatest strength, held the wyvern down, pinned his claw to the ground. And Greta, the hare, tattooed on the wyvern the name of the goddess of the summer. And the wyvern said, "Oh, I remember, and I will help." And one by one, he and the dragon Oscar brought all the wyverns, 50 in number, to Greta. And she tattooed the name of the god of summer on them. And with that force, Oscar felt ready. And in a tumult of fire and poison, they went into the chasms of the frost giants, and the frost giants, seeing that and thinking it was Ragnarok, fled into the dark. And then Oscar and Greta and the wyverns looked at the chasm, and there was the goddess of the summer, but she was behind a black waterfall, and all the dragon's fire and all the dragon's strength could not get through it. And so Oscar said, "There's only one power that can get through it, and it's locked in me since I became a dragon. Dig out with your tooth the ever-glowing ember." And Greta said, "Will I not kill you?" And Oscar said, "Have we a choice?" And so it was, Greta slit him open with a tooth that could cut through anything. She reached inside the living dragon, pulled out the bronze pot and the ever-glowing ember, blew blew up its fire, although it scorched her. And with his fire burned right through the black waterfall, as Oscar the dragon faltered, as she burned up. But just as she burned through, there was a muttering behind them. The god of the winter was coming. But it was too late. The ember went through the waterfall, and hearing that, there was a sound like laughter, like the spring, the laughter of the goddess of the summer. And the god of the winter sun came roaring up like a nightmare. Just at the moment she came out, and he pointed his great wand at her and said, "I will capture you again, my dear." And she laughed and said, "Oh no. You caught me when I was sleeping, when my power is spent, but now my power is full wrought." And so saying, she lit a fire, a mighty blaze, that blasted the rocks of the palace of the god of winter, casting them into ocean, forcing him under sea. And in her light and in her splendour, she turned the animals back to men. She made Oscar and Greta live again. And then she turned to him and said, "I owe you much. Where would you have me set you?" And Greta said, "All my family are eaten. I've got nowhere to go." And Oscar said, "And I don't want to go home. They always laughed at me. And nobody will believe me." And the goddess of the summer said, "All right, I'll tell you what we'll do. Now the god of the winter is slain. For a while. But I will sleep in time. Let us go to the south, and you will build for me a people, and I will dwell there in winter. And that is why there is an ocean in the Arctic, and I suppose why it is always warm in the south."